Alright, we're going to get into doing some drawings and explaining some of the details about what's going on. Alright, so obviously I'm in a different platform. We're over in Ninja 8 this time. And I'll show you something real quick. If you don't like that big display across the top when you load up an indicator, which shows all your input settings, just go down to this setting here, label, and put quotes around whatever the name of it is, and it will display whatever is in these quotes. Like so, up here in the left corner. Here's the deal with what's going on. All of these buttons across the top have an effect on what is actually drawn when you put anything on the screen. For instance, let's just go ahead and draw something up here. We'll have a nice lovely bat pattern. And then we'll select this bat pattern so that way we can make some edits to it. And then go over here. I'll just slide it over here under the button so you can see the direct impact. Alright, so if I hit the label, the XABCD disappears. If I hit the name, it won't display the name of the pattern. Price projections affects this information over here. It won't show the prices in the information display. Risk reward information, the risk reward zones, and the price lines, which usually if you have those displayed, you won't be displaying the price information and stuff like that. But, you know, whatever. If you like them together, then so be it. Have fun with it. The dynamic fib is all of these little yellow numbers, and the yellow numbers, when it's first drawn on, it literally, it's just a live update of exactly what's happening. For instance, let's say I just draw on a new line here. You'll notice I have 21 pips, 12 bars. What this is telling me is I am 21.6 pips away from where I started and 12 bars away. It doesn't matter which side I'm on. It's absolute values that it's displaying, so it just gives you a literal dimension. And then of course, if I were to lock in this point and draw anything further, this dynamic fib display is just telling me a retracement of the previous drawing that I did, or like in this instance where I go below the A point, notice how it switches from being just barely above 0 to 1% and increasing when I go up. If I go below the A point, it suddenly switches to 100 and some odd percent. That's because it can be used as measurement of an extension. However you want to draw this, you can use it as a Fibonacci measurement tool if you want to. It's not necessary, but you can still turn it off and on live. You can live update any of this stuff as you desire. You know, obviously I have a risk reward set up here, so that's what it's displaying. I'm gonna go ahead and delete that for the moment. Reselect this. What we're doing with this now, we'll continue on with the static Fibonacci levels. These are fixed stacks of levels that can be adjusted inside the indicator settings. These are just the default levels, but you can easily change these out to whatever you want them to be. And then of course, these levels will change depending upon what type of pattern you're drawing. If this were a cipher pattern, for instance, let's just go ahead and make it a cipher pattern. You'll notice how all of these levels, let me get rid of this, get that out of the way. They now use the C point as the 0. And that's because that is how the cipher works. So it will automatically change depending upon the type of pattern that you're drawing. And if I were to, you'll also notice when I have a completed pattern and I change the type that it is, notice now I have a cipher pattern, whereas originally it's a bat pattern. If you look up at where the D point is at, you'll notice the D point's projected correctly for a bat pattern, but if I go down to where a cipher would be correct, suddenly the D point is in the wrong place. If I were to click the pattern in at this point, it updates the D for me. So it will automatically correct valid patterns when you make edits to them. Now what we've got going, the color. Obviously you can have a whole bunch of different patterns and you get a bunch of that stuff going on. It tends to overlay each other. The way the default is set, it uses the automatic color. So there's a whole array of colors within the settings that can be changed out to however you like it. What it does, it cycles through the colors as you draw the patterns. So that way, if you have two patterns that are nearly overlays of each other, you can at least distinguish them by having different colors for the different patterns immediately and automatically done for you, so you don't have to fight with it. You do, however, have the option of changing this to manual color, and then you can change the color of the pattern to however you want it. Literally just kind of does whatever you want it to. It does not affect certain aspects of the functions though, because well, for instance, with this, the static Fibonacci's, they're always displayed in this color, and it's because they can easily be turned on and off in the blink of an eye. So the chance that you're going to have many patterns with these overlaid, it's rather rare. And so anyway, that's why this is set up the way it is. The same thing goes for the dynamic Fibonacci's. They're yellow, and that's it. And it's because they're very simple to turn on and off, and so they're very unlikely to get in the way. Now I'm going to get into these two. We'll clear this pattern and then we'll start a new drawing. These two directly involve a little trick. I did a little bit of research on how people learn and sort of brain hacks to enhance learning speed. What this does as you draw these out, let me remove these dynamic fibs so they don't get in the way. As you draw these patterns out, you'll notice after you click in the A and you start to draw in your B point, this zone fades into existence. And when you get within these outer bars on the zone, it tells you the type of pattern, and it will keep doing this until you get outside of that zone, and then it will slowly fade out and disappear. So what's going on is these two buttons here control the display of these zones. The price lines control the display of whether or not you get the lines, and the price projection zone determines whether or not it draws the zones. And of course you can have both of these off if you don't want it to draw either one. Now the purpose of these, what this does is when you're first getting used to learning how the patterns look, they fade into existence to kind of help give you an idea of, well, okay, when I am first drawing a pattern, this is the area that I need to be looking in to consider a potentially valid pattern of any sort. So this is the range that you would get for a cipher pattern that could potentially be a valid B point. And if you go higher, you notice it switches. This is either a bat or a cipher pattern, and notice the qualification for a good B point for a bat is entirely within the range for a good cipher pattern. So anything in this range could potentially be a valid B point for a bat pattern. And if you continue on up, it switches to Gartley or cipher, because the entirety of this is within the valid range for a cipher also, and anything in here is a valid Gartley pattern. And if we continue on up, you'll notice it switches from being cipher to just Gartley. The reason is it's only a valid cipher pattern up to this point, and once you cross over, this extra little bit is only valid for a Gartley pattern. So it does take into account that all of these ranges do overlap and not exactly on everything. And then of course, if you break out the top side on the B point for Gartley, it goes into butterfly territory, and it's a valid butterfly all the way up to the X point, in which case it is no longer a valid butterfly pattern anymore. And then if you go above the X point, you're getting into drawing of a risk reward zone type setup. And this is not the only point where it does this. Let's say we go ahead and lock in the B point for Gartley. And now it's displaying a possible range for a valid Gartley pattern. It would do this regardless of which pattern we're doing. If I move this to a bat, you can see it changes live as we're doing this. Changes the whole range of what's valid for butterfly, or if it's just looking for Gartley, or if it's just looking for a bat, or if it's looking for a cipher. Well, suddenly it disappears. Well, wait a minute, what's going on with that? All right, well, let's go ahead and continue drawing this. As we continue down, notice we have a pretense of a bat pattern. Well, now it is a cipher pattern. Notice this range that it has, it'll tell you it's an invalid cipher. If we look up here, invalid cipher, that is because the certain point has to reach down within here. And that is the close or the open of a candle has to be down within this range. And you'll notice if you go below the range, it still stays a valid cipher pattern. And that is because a cipher pattern can extend much farther down for the candle wick. The range that I marked out to keep it from being overly complicated, I only marked out the range for the close open requirement of a candle to be within this area. The close or open, if it happens below this, it wouldn't be a valid cipher, of course, but for a wick to go down, it would be valid all the way down to right here, which I can't remember the exact figure, but it has to do with where the valid D point is located, because one of the criteria for the cipher pattern is that the D point cannot be below the B point. So if the C point goes far enough down that you cannot get a valid D point above where the B point is, then it will invalidate it as a cipher pattern. And additionally to this, you don't have to display the name to get all this information. You can also watch up here in the button display, and it will give you updates as to what's going on. Like it'll tell you you have potentials for everything. It won't tell you, of course, that you have invalid stuff going on, because it doesn't calculate all of the stuff that this has got going on live. But it will tell you that it's a potential possibility that you could have a type of a pattern being drawn. So all of this stuff does inner work. Another oddity that I'm going to go ahead and point out so that way people won't be freaking out. Let me get these out of the way. The way NinjaTrader handles crossovers of the weekend for the time frame, this oddity with the way the data is, the dates are calculated, when you cross over, you'll notice this ray that projects to the left on the chart. It suddenly points down when I get over this specific candle, and then it flips back up when I go away from it. What's going on is it crosses over a weekend. Anytime that happens, your candle is going to do that weird stuff, and I'm on I thought I was on the 4 hour, but anyway, it will do that anytime you cross over a weekend and there's a gap in the dates. This is going to happen. It's not a glitch or anything. It's just the way the chart calculates and handles the time on the chart for the candles. In my experimentation, it's never been problematic, so I was able to just ignore it. But I just wanted to bring that point up just in case you were drawing and you saw that and thought it was a glitch. It's just the way Ninja handles the charts. This problem doesn't exist with MetaTrader. When you are moving points on a pattern in the selection and editing modes, there is this issue about the movement of stuff between pattern drawings and the risk reward pattern that is a significant difference. With these patterns, all you can do is either draw them, or if you go into selection mode, you can edit stuff simply enough. Change what type of pattern it is that you're drawing, edit any points that happens to be drawn in. Keep in mind is when you draw a pattern, wherever you draw it, if you want to move it, you can only move it one point at a time. That is not the case with a risk reward pattern. With a risk reward pattern, and I'll just draw one on real quick. Yeah, whatever. This is good enough. Okay, so if I have my risk reward pattern here and I decide that I want to edit points, so on and so forth, I can, move my entry price. I can come down and I can move my stop loss however I want to. I can move my target price however I want to. No problems whatsoever. But I can't move the entire pattern unless I have locked the B point in place. So I switch back over to drawing mode. I click, which locks the pattern in place. And if you have the labels turned on, whoops, wrong button. If you have the labels turned on, then you can see that it has drawn a C and a D point. If you don't have the labels turned on, of course, it's not going to display that. But if you click the B point, then you can tell that it has drawn those points in, because the dashed lines that connect the X and the A and the B point will have disappeared like they did in this. At this point, this risk reward pattern takes on a difference that doesn't exist with any of the others. If you click this fourth point here, you can then grab the entire thing and you can move it. And you'll notice it jumping. This is another one of those quirks that happens because of how NinjaTrader deals with the weekends. Anyway, it doesn't exist in MetaTrader. It's one of those anomalies that is exclusive to NinjaTrader, but you can move the pattern anywhere you want to, so on and so forth. And when you click, it will automatically just redraw the pattern in whatever location. And then, of course, you can still edit the target or anything however you wish. In addition to that, there are some other attributes of how this functions that you may possibly be interested in. One is when you click on the target or the stop loss, you'll notice there's a couple of different things that happens. Obviously, the price moves around with the cursor. You'll also notice that the ray, the dotted line that normally projects left, if you go on the other side to the right of the risk reward pattern, it will suddenly project to the right. So what this is for is literally for helping with alignment purposes. If you want to align to a certain price level, it will help you to map that out with having to do it just purely by feel. You actually do have a visual reference for it. In addition to that, you'll notice this line that's moving up and down horizontally, or not horizontally, vertically, that is the same color as the price label. What this is doing is showing you where your original starting point is for your price. And it kind of helps gives you just a really simple visual indicator of how significantly you have moved the price away from it. Say, in case you're way over here checking some price, you can kind of just at a glance get an idea of how significantly you've moved it from where it originally was located. Additionally to that, there is a barrier on all three of the prices. You can't move the entry price above the target. You can't move it below the stop loss. And you can't move the target above the entry price. And you can't move the stop loss above the entry price. Or below, depending on which side they're on. But it tracks all of this information. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to also make a note of. You'll notice when you do move the risk reward pattern, everything maintains the exact same fixed aspect. You can't edit any of this stuff when you're moving the entire pattern, but once you get it in place where you want it, then you can immediately go and edit any of the points. Another simple thing you can do with the drawing function, let's say you wanted to do a quick measure of a retracement. You can do that either with the static Fibonacci's, which is simple. All you have to do is get an X and an A point locked in. As soon as you have that B point available, and if you have your static Fibonacci's turned on, it will automatically pop that in, and you can tell just by a quick visual reference. So this can also be used as a very simple Fibonacci stack measurement tool. Additionally, if you don't need to know just a quick visual reference, but you want a sort of an exact measurement, you can use the dynamic Fibonacci measurement where the little yellow numbers are displayed, and you can tell exactly what your retracement is looking like. So you can keep very fine tabs on how that is. And of course, like I was pointing out earlier, with dynamic Fibonacci, you can use it as an extension tool and also as an inversion tool. It will track above and below correctly. With the lock, of course, we went over this briefly. You can either have it on the magnet, where it very briefly checks on either side of each candle point to determine where the peak is, and it will automatically try to stay locked to the best available option. And this range is adjustable within the settings, and you'll notice it will not pick every candle as I go across. It jumps, especially like right here is a good example, how it jumps between those 2 points. It's sampling all of those candles within that range, and so it will not pick anything that is lesser than the highest point in that range that it's checking. If, for instance, I needed to lock to some point that's down in this valley, I could easily switch over to the standard type of tracking, and then it will lock to whatever bar my candle is directly in line with, which is great for this type of stuff. But when you're trying to draw a pattern in a hurry, this can be a huge bit of a problem when you're trying to lock exactly to one specific point. Additionally, the deleting functions that can be used. Let me draw a couple of patterns on here real quick. All right, so we have these 3 patterns now. If I want to delete everything that I have drawn on a chart, not just the visual stuff, but there could even be stuff, in historical or future that I've drawn. If I want to clear the chart completely of all the stuff that I've drawn, then I would hit clear all. On the other hand, if I want to delete a very specific pattern, let's say I want to get rid of this first bat, you can do that with a delete key But first, it has to be selected. So right now, if I were to hit the delete, it does nothing because it's looking at position number 4, no drawing selected. So there isn't a drawing here for the delete to delete. If I want to delete something, I have to go into selection mode with the shift key, of course. Then I pick the pattern that I want, and I'm looking up here when I click this, and you'll notice it switches to number 1 position bat, and that's this particular pattern here. Then I turn off the selection and I hit delete, and that pattern is now gone. And then if I want to draw, I could immediately draw something else here in its place. Now let's say I wanted to put a butterfly in instead, and ta-da, we have a butterfly pattern. And that should take care of all the information about the buttons that you may have questions about potentially. Yeah. And in the next video, we'll start getting into the indicator settings. Have a good one.